They put a pickaxe in my hands, pointed me toward a limestone ridge, and told me I was digging a drainage channel. I knew it was a lie before the sun went down on the first day. By the fourth month, I knew something worse. When Cornelius Dane told us we were being reassigned on Friday, I looked into his eyes and understood that Friday was never coming for men like us. My name was Mark. At least, that was not the name written in Dane's ledger. In his books, I was something smaller, a function, a category, a useful pair of hands. Lead hand, ridge detail, for words that explained everything he believed he needed to know about me. Cornelius Dane owned land in Harlan County, Kentucky, so much of it that people spoke his name the way they spoke the weather, as if it were simply part of the world. His name sat on courthouse plaques, on church donation boards, on legal papers thick enough to bury a man under. He was not a person people questioned. He was the kind of man people adjusted themselves around. So when he handed 4 enslaved men iron picks in the autumn of 1856, and sent us 2 miles into a hollow no one used anymore, nobody asked why. He told us we were cutting drainage through limestone, said the lower field had been taking on too much standing water, said the ridge needed opening. He said it calmly, without effort, the way men like Cornelius Dane always lied. The ridge sat far from the main estate, far from the road, far from anyone who might hear a cry and decide it belonged to them. Limestone underfoot, cold even before dawn, and a strange silence that settled over the hollow every evening, like the place itself was listening. There were 4 of us. Patrick, 52, me's ruined from years of carrying more than any body should carry. Every morning before first light he prayed, not loudly, not for comfort, for structure, like a man building a frame around himself so he wouldn't come apart. Eli was 24, young enough that his strength still frightened the men who used it. His hands bled through every wrap we tied around them. He never complained, but I had seen the way he looked at those hands after supper. Not with pain, with anger, cold, careful anger. Then there was Stephen. Stephen had not made an unnecessary sound in 4 years. Some men go quiet because they are beaten into it. Some go quiet because they have discovered silence is a weapon no one can take away. Stephen counted things, pick strikes, steps, breaths, anything with numbers, anything that kept the mind moving forward. And then there was me, 38 years old enough to know that survival is mostly observation. A man in my position learns early that power is never as mysterious as it wants to appear. The trick is simple. Find out what the man with the power actually wants. Cornelius Dane rode out every evening between 4 and 5, always alone, always from the South Trail, always dismounting at the same flat rock above the dig line. He tied his horse to the same cedar, walked the same circle, asked the same empty questions. At first, he looked like any landowner pretending to inspect labor. But by the 3rd week, I understood something. He was not watching the drainage. He was watching us watch the drainage. And then, every single evening, at the end of his inspection, he did the same thing. He walked to the eastern face of the ridge, stopped 6 feet away, and looked at one specific crack in the limestone. Never touched it. That was what told me everything. Men like Dane touched whatever they believed belonged to them. Fence posts, timber, tool chests, other human beings. He touched all of it casually, possessively, without thought. But not that crack, never that crack. He looked at it, then deliberately looked away. The way a starving man looks away from a table he intends to clear once everyone else has left the room. Cold air came through that crack on the mornings when the temperature dropped. Not cave cold, not stream cold, something else, older, held. By week 6, I knew exactly where Cornelius Dane's eyes went when he thought no one noticed. By week 8, I knew he had been searching for whatever lay behind that stone for most of his life. I told no one. Not yet. Because information is only useful when the moment for it arrives. Before that, it is just wait. The moment arrived yesterday morning. Dane rode up before sunrise, dismounted without greeting, and announced, in the tone of a man discussing whether, that the ridge work was finished. He said we were being reassigned to his Lexington estate by Friday. Said the drainage had gone far enough. Said there was no need to keep 4 men in a hollow once the digging was done. I looked at my hands, then at the ridge, then at him, and I felt something settle in my bones so clearly it might as well have been spoken aloud. There was no Lexington. There was no reassignment. There was no Friday. Not for us. A man who has spent 38 years reading authority learns to recognize when the lie is no longer for your comfort, but for the speaker's convenience. Dane had no intention of moving us anywhere. He intended to finish using us. Then finish with us. That evening, after his horse disappeared down the south trail and the last sound of hoofbeats had faded, the camp went very quiet. Not empty. Held. Like a breath no one had let out yet. I sat by the fire with the others. Watched Patrick finish one cycle of his prayer. Watched Eli stare at his hands. Watched Stephen count silently into the flames. Then I said what none of them needed me to soften. There is no Lexington. Friday is not coming for us the way he said it is. No one looked surprised. That was the hardest part. Not the truth. The fact that all 3 of them had already reached it. Patrick closed his eyes slowly. Eli lifted his head. Stephen nodded once. So I told them the rest. About the eastern crack in the limestone. About the cold air. About the way Dane's eyes moved there every evening and then away again. Whatever he came here for, it's still in the ground. And if he means to kill us before Friday, then we reach it first. The fire cracked. Nobody spoke for a while. Then Patrick's prayer stopped. Eli leaned forward. Stephen looked at me. And in the silence that followed, the decision made itself. We were not running. Not yet. That night, we were going back into the ridge. We didn't light torches at first. Light travels. Sound travels. And men like Cornelius Dane survive by noticing both. So the first night, we worked in the dark. Not the kind of dark you find in a room after a candle dies. The kind of dark that belongs to the earth itself. Heavy. Pressured. Like something sitting on your eyes. We moved by memory. For months of digging had carved the ridge into our bodies. Every ledge. Every drop. Every shift in the stone beneath our feet. I led. Eli behind me with the pick. Patrick reinforcing the passage. Stephen timing the strikes. Always together. Always controlled. We took tools slowly. One at a time over 2 days. So the count in Dane's chest wouldn't feel wrong. Wrapped our hands in torn bedding to dull the sound. Worked in pairs. 2 digging. 2 lying in their bedrolls above ground. So anyone watching from the tree line would still see bodies. That was the first rule. Never let the man with power realize he has already lost control. Because the moment he realizes it, he becomes dangerous in ways that don't follow logic. By the second night, We reached the crack. From the outside, it had looked narrow. A flaw in the rock. Nothing more. From inside, it was something else. Wider. Breathing. The air coming through it had changed. Not just cold. Old. Like it had been sealed somewhere that didn't belong to time the way the surface did. Eli pressed his face close to it. Didn't say a word. Just stood there breathing it in. Patrick touched the stone beside it. Closed his eyes. Stephen stopped counting. That was when I knew. Whatever lay behind that wall. It wasn't just something hidden. It was something kept. We widened the crack in silence. Slow. Careful. Never striking twice in the same rhythm. Listening between every movement. Waiting for any sound that didn't belong to us. By the third night, we hit something that wasn't limestone. Patrick's pick stopped mid-swing. Like it had struck a decision instead of stone. He tried again. Same result. The sound that came back wasn't the sound of rock breaking. It was the sound of something holding. We didn't speak. Didn't need to. All four of us moved in. Hands. Forearms. Shoulders. Pressing against something that had been placed there deliberately. 12 minutes. No words. Just breath. Effort. And the understanding that whatever we were touching had been put here by people who expected it to last. It held. Right up until it didn't. On the 11th minute, it shifted. Just enough. And then the passage exhaled. Cold air rushed past our faces. Not fast. Not violent. Steady. Controlled. Like something that had been waiting a very long time. And had finally decided it was done waiting. The smell hit next. Deep earth. Dry stone. And something underneath both of those things. That had no name. No one moved. Not for a full minute. Maybe longer. We just stood there. Hands still against the stone. Breathing air that had not touched another human being in 2,000 years. I counted my heartbeats. Got to 40. Then stopped. Eli reached for the torch. Lit it. And stepped forward. The chamber answered the light. That's the only way I can say it. It answered. Copper plates lined the walls. Large. Curved. Etched with figures that moved as the flame shifted. Animals. Human forms. Patterns so precise they couldn't have been accidental. Ceramic vessels rested along natural shells. Dozens of them. Each painted with a face. Not symbols. Not designs. Faces. Individual. Specific. Looking back at us from 2,000 years away. Like no time had passed at all. Stone figures stood in rows along the floor. Each one placed with intention. Spaced evenly. Facing the same direction. Not decoration. Arrangement. At the center of the chamber, on a raised platform of untouched limestone, sat something wrapped. Preserved. Impossible. Eli dropped to his knees. Didn't decide to. His body just gave in. The torch tilted in his hand, light shifting across the walls like breath. And he made a sound I had never heard from him before. Not a word. Something underneath words. Stephen stood at the entrance, and for the first time in 4 years, he cried. Not loud. Not broken. Just steady. Patrick pressed his hand to the wall, eyes closed, mouth moving, but not in any prayer I had ever heard. And me, I stayed at the threshold, because something about that place told me this wasn't a treasure, not in the way Cornelius Dane had believed. This was a record. Every object, every placement, every face, chosen, arranged, left behind on purpose, not to be taken, to be understood. Then I saw it. One object, set apart from everything else. A small copper piece, not displayed, not decorated, just placed, waiting. I stepped inside, only once, picked it up, felt its weight, heavier than it should have been, studied the markings, didn't understand them, but I understood something else. It didn't belong in my pocket. So I turned, walked back to the entrance, and hid it in the wall, behind a loose piece of limestone, at shoulder height. I didn't know why, only that it felt like the right answer to a question I hadn't been asked yet. Then I turned back to the others, looked at the faint gray light beginning to bleed into the passage. We had been underground 4 hours, maybe less, which meant one thing. Cornelius Dane would be riding out soon. I said it quietly. We go. And none of us knew yet that he had already been watching. He had been there the second night. In the trees. Watching. Cornelius Dane did not miss things he believed belonged to him. And that ridge had belonged to him in his mind for 40 years. He saw the torchlight before we ever saw him, a faint glow moving inside the stone, too deep for anyone else to notice. But not for a man who had spent a lifetime staring at that exact place. He sat on his horse in the dark, did not move, did not speak. Waited. Because men like Dane don't rush the moment they believe is already theirs. They let other people do the work of reaching it. Then they take it. On the third night, he saw the opening, saw the stone shift, saw 4 shadows disappear into the earth. And he waited 20 more minutes. Then he turned his horse and rode south, not away, to collect what he would need. Morning came fast, gray, cold. We had just made it back to the camp, dirt still under our nails, air from the chambers still in our lungs. When we heard it, hooves, more than one. Patrick stopped mid-prayer, Eli stood, Stephen didn't move. I didn't need to look, I already knew. They came in hard, 6 men behind him, armed, no questions, no delay. What happened next isn't something that needs detail. You already know how that part goes. Hands forced down, wrists bound, boot in your back to remind you what you are. And the man who ordered it, never looking at your face. That was the part that mattered. Cornelius Dane walked through the camp, without acknowledging a single one of us. Not to confirm, not to question, not even to enjoy it. We were already finished in his mind. They dragged us to a root cellar a quarter-mile east, dug into clay, low ceiling, no light. The kind of place built for storage, and used for disappearance. They threw us inside, closed the door, locked it from the outside. And then, he went back to the ridge, alone. To take what he believed was his. We stayed in that dark for 3 days. Dark that doesn't just surround you, it changes you. Patrick prayed, not constantly, but like breathing, something always moving beneath the silence. Stephen counted. I stopped trying to follow what? Numbers, patterns, anything that moved forward. Eli changed. The anger burned out of him. What was left was something quieter, colder, more dangerous. And me, I planned, not escape, that comes later. First, you understand what the man with power just lost. Because Dane had gone into that chamber and come back different. I didn't see it, but I knew it. Men like him don't come back unchanged, unless something went wrong. And there is only one thing that makes a man like Cornelius Dane feel wrong. He expected to find something, and didn't. The copper piece, still hidden in the wall. That meant one thing. For the first time in 40 years, Cornelius Dane had reached the end of his search, and come up short. That made him dangerous, but it also made him blind. Because a man who thinks he is close to winning stops looking for what he's missing. On the third day, we heard something. Not boots, not voices, metal against metal. Then a pause, then again, the lock being tested. We all went still, every one of us, listening. The second strike broke it. The door opened. Light came in, gray, cold. And a man stood in the doorway, not one of Dane's. Wrong boots, wrong posture, wrong kind of eyes. He held bolt cutters in one hand, survey satchel at his side, things that weren't meant to be opened. He looked at us. We looked at him. And in that moment, everything balanced. Because now, there was someone in this story who did not belong to Cornelius Dane. His name was Virgil Dunn. He didn't say it right away. Men like him don't lead with names. They lead with decisions. He stood in the doorway of that cellar, bolt cutters still in his hand, looking at 4 men he had just made a problem for himself by freeing. And he knew it. You could see it in the way he didn't step back. I gave him 40 seconds. Not everything, just enough. Dane, the ridge, the chamber, and the fact that whatever was inside it was not what Dane thought it was. Dunn listened, didn't interrupt, didn't question. When I finished, he stayed quiet for a moment, doing the math. Then he said 2 words. Show me. We moved at dusk, not fast, not slow. The kind of pace that doesn't attract attention, but doesn't hesitate either. Dunn read the land the way I read people. His eyes moved across the ridge before we even reached it, measuring, comparing. He had seen this place before. On paper. We reached the passage just as the light began to die. I stepped forward, reached into the wall, pulled the copper piece out from where I had hidden it, held it in the lantern light. Dunn leaned in, studied it, didn't touch it. That's not decorative. Before I could answer, a voice came from the dark behind us. Old, calm, and completely unsurprised. I wondered which direction you would come from. We turned, and he stepped out of the passage. Slow, unhurried, like he had been standing there long before we arrived. Thin, older than any of us, but not weak. Reduced to exactly what was necessary. His eyes moved across us, one by one, then settled on the copper piece in my hand. You came from the wrong direction. No one spoke. He looked at me again. At least, you didn't put it in your pocket. That landed heavier than anything he could have explained, because I understood what he meant. Every man who had found that chamber before us had taken, grabbed what they could carry, treated it like something abandoned, something unclaimed. But I hadn't. I had left it, hidden, waiting. That was the difference. He held out his hand. I gave him the copper piece. We moved inside the chamber together. All of us. Even Dunn. Sat on the stone floor while the torchlight held steady against the walls. The faces watched us, just like before. Patient, unchanged. The old man placed the copper piece between us. Didn't pick it back up. Just let it sit there. Then he spoke. Not loudly. Not like a man explaining something. Like a man remembering it. This is not treasure. It is a boundary. He turned the piece over. Showed us the markings on the back. Names. 3 of them. Cherokee, witnesses. The land described in those markings. This ridge, this hollow. Over 1,000 acres of it. Had been recorded long before Cornelius Dane's name ever touched this county. 60 years before his first deed. 60 years before his father ever claimed it. Dunn went still beside me, because he understood what that meant, better than any of us. This wasn't hidden wealth. It was evidence. Permanent. Deliberate. Unavoidable. A record that couldn't burn, couldn't be rewritten, couldn't disappear in a courthouse fire. The old man looked at me, not asking, not testing, knowing. What do you do with it? The question hung there, and I already had the answer. Because 3 miles south, in a kitchen house where walls were thin, and conversations were never meant to be overheard, there was someone who had been listening for years. A woman named Eunice. And if anyone knew how to turn truth into something that could break a man like Cornelius Dane, it was her. 3 things moved at the same time, and all of them pointed at Cornelius Dane. He reached the ridge at first light, faster than he ever moved before. That was the first mistake. A man who prides himself on patience should never be seen rushing. He had already found the cellar empty, the lock broken, the ground disturbed. 4 sets of footprints leading north. He followed them, straight to us. We were standing at the passage entrance, all of us. Me, Patrick, Eli, Stephen, and Dunn. Dane didn't ask questions, didn't shout. He just looked, and nodded once. 2 of his men raised their guns, pulled the triggers. Nothing. No misfire. No delay. Nothing. The second man tried again. Same result. The third man didn't try. He looked at the weapon in his hands, then at us, and stepped back. That was the moment. The exact moment the ground shifted under Cornelius Dane. Because for the first time in his life, something he relied on didn't answer him. 3 miles south, Eunice had finished writing her letter. 7 years of listening through thin walls. 7 years of names, dates, deals. All of it placed carefully on paper. No mistakes. She didn't write like someone hoping to be believed. She wrote like someone who knew she couldn't be ignored. Dates, witness names, boundary lines, and one detail placed at the very end. Thomas Greer. Signed as a witness in 1851. Buried in 1847. A dead man signing a legal document. Not an error. A crack. And once a crack appears in something built on paper, everything begins to break. Virgil Dunn filed his deposition 3 days later. Precise. Clean. Translated the copper piece into the language courts understand. Boundaries. Coordinates. Proof. By the time the summons reached Dane's door, it was already over. He just didn't know it yet. The courtroom in Frankfurt was quiet. Not tense. Not dramatic. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes before something permanent. Dane sat with his attorneys, hands flat on the table. The same posture he had used his entire life. The posture of a man who expects to win. The commissioner read the documents. Slow, clear, one date after another, one name after another. Then he read Thomas Greer, 1851. Then again, 1847. He let the silence sit between those two numbers, just long enough for everyone in the room to understand. Dane didn't move, didn't argue, didn't reach for anything, because there was nothing left to reach for. The land was taken, not seized, returned, to no one. The ridge, the hollow, the chamber beneath it, all of it stripped of his name. He walked out of that courthouse alive, which tells you everything you need to know about the law in 1856 Kentucky, and who it was built for. But something else had been taken, something he would never get back. Certainty. Patrick stayed near the ridge. For the first time in 52 years, he chose where he stood. Stephen crossed north with me, said 4 words when we reached the river. I won't repeat them. They belonged to him. Eli crossed too, still carrying what burned inside him. He would need it. Eunice left before sunrise. Didn't look back. Because some places only hold you while you stay. She was done staying. The old man sealed the chamber again. Stone fitted back into place, as if it had never been opened. Some things are not meant to be owned, only understood. And me. I stood at the edge of the Ohio River, cold water, fast current. No land, no name, no paper that said I belonged anywhere, or to anyone. I stepped forward, into the current. Because a man the law says owns nothing, can still carry something far more dangerous than land. He can carry truth. And once truth is set in motion, there is no one left who can claim it.